Welcome to the deep dive. So today we're diving into, well, a paradox, something that really feels like it defines modern life.
Yeah.
We live in this age where pleasure is just everywhere, so accessible, right? Like literally at our fingertips, 24/7.
Constantly available.
Yeah, constantly. And yet, for all this indulgence, I guess, so many of us feel increasingly miserable or anxious or just, deeply dissatisfied. Why is that?
It's a huge question.
It really is. And we're exploring it today through Dr. Anna Lembke's book, Dopamine Nation, Finding Balance in an Indulgent Age. It's a really powerful read. And I have to ask you, for someone just trying to navigate this, hyper-stimulating world we're in, what makes this book stand out? Why is it so compelling?
Well, I think what Dr. Lemke does so effectively, she's a Stanford psychiatrist and addiction specialist, is lay out this core argument. Our constant chase for these dopamine hits, these rewards, it's actually rewiring our brains.
Rewiring them?
Yeah.
How so?
It's driving this surge in what she identifies as addiction and, importantly, emotional dysregulation. So this deep dive, we're going to explain how that happens, why it happens, and crucially, what we can maybe do about it.
Right, the practical side. So our mission today is really to pull out the key insights from Dopamine Nation for you. We really want to unpack how this pleasure-pain balance in the brain works. That's central.
Absolutely fundamental.
And why our modern world, this abundance, is neurologically, well, maybe unsustainable.
Yeah.
And then we'll get into Dr. Lemke's strategies, which are quite counterintuitive sometimes, for finding real joy and balance.
Definitely not the usual advice.
No. And we'll cover the tools she offers, but also importantly take a look at maybe some of the limitations in the approach, just so you get a full picture, a holistic understanding.
Good. Yeah, got to have that balance.
Okay, so let's dig into this core concept.
Yeah.
The brain's pleasure-pain balance. It's really the cornerstone, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, Lemke explains that pleasure and pain, they're processed in the same neighborhood in the brain.
Okay.
And they work like a seesaw, trying to keep things level, to maintain what scientists call homeostasis, like a biological balancing act.
Right, a seesaw. So when we do something pleasurable, say eating chocolate or scrolling social media.
Exactly. Or getting a like on a post, even something small like that, it tilts the seesaw down on the pleasure side.
Makes sense.
But the brain immediately wants to level it out again. It's wired for balance. So it compensates. It starts adding these little metaphorical weights to the pain side of the seesaw.
Ah, okay. So it pushes back with discomfort or pain to restore equilibrium.
Precisely, to bring it back to level.
So thinking about that seesaw, what happens if we just keep pushing the pleasure side down? Like nonstop stimulation, which is kind of modern life, right?
Well, that's the crux of the problem Lemke identifies. If we're chronically over-consuming pleasurable stuff, we're constantly, relentlessly tilting that seesaw. The brain's response, it just keeps adding more and more pain weights to the other side to counteract it.
So the baseline shifts.
Exactly. The baseline shifts. We end up in this state where our neutral point is actually slightly on the pain side. So we need more and more of that pleasure hit just to feel normal, just to get back to zero.
Wow.
And that, she argues very convincingly, is a hallmark of addiction. It's that tolerance, needing more for the same effect or just to not feel bad.
She has that quote, doesn't she? Something like,
Yeah, it's powerful. We're all running from pain. Some of us take opioids, some of us binge Netflix, some of us shop. But the result is the same.
that really lands because it connects the dots between severe addiction and, well, everyday behaviors.
Totally. And that's a key takeaway. This isn't just about, heroin addiction or alcoholism, the things we typically label.
Right.
Her point is this mechanism affects all of us. It explains why, even surrounded by constant potential fun and easy gratification, so many people feel kind of numb or restless or, as she says, emotionally dysregulated.
Yeah, that numb feeling, like you're scrolling or watching, but not really enjoying it anymore.
You're just trying to push the seesaw back to level, maybe even just briefly, chasing the next little hit to escape that baseline state of subtle discomfort.
Which brings us right to this next big idea in the book, modern abundance and how it relates to the spectrum of addiction.
Yeah, because our brains, Lemke points out, didn't evolve for this. They evolved for a world of scarcity, where rewards were hard-won, after effort, like the hunt.
Not for this flood of stimuli we have now.
Exactly. A flood, especially from our digital devices or smartphones. They're just relentless.
And they're designed that way, aren't they, to hook us?
Absolutely. They're powerful dopamine feedback loops. They hijack our natural reward systems with constant easy hits.
It makes you think about those seemingly harmless things, right? like constantly checking email or scrolling through news feeds or getting lost in a video game for hours.
Hmm. Benign on the surface, maybe. But she shows how they can easily spiral into compulsive habits precisely because of that pleasure-pain seesaw. Those small, frequent hits keep tilting it.
Yeah, that really hits home, that feeling of like looking up after maybe hours of binge watching something and feeling not relaxed, but just sort of drained or empty.
Yes.
Yeah.
That perfectly captures it. You weren't really getting profound pleasure, you were just trying to stave off the other side of the seesaw.
Right. And that's why she broadens the definition of addiction so much. It's not just substances.
No, she's very clear it's a spectrum. It includes these subtler but still problematic compulsive behaviors, like the binge watching or workaholism,
Overeating,
compulsive shopping, gambling. Like, the list goes on. And the book really pushes you, the listener, to reflect honestly. What are your habits? Are there things you do compulsively, even if they seem commonplace?
that self-reflection piece is huge.
It is. Because recognizing it is the first step.
Okay, so if our brains are wired for scarcity, but we live in abundance, and this is tilting our balance, what's the fix? What does Lembke prescribe? And they are pretty counterintuitive, some of them.
They really are. The first big one is embracing abstinence and delay, which sounds, quite radical in our instant gratification culture.
Abstinence even from things that aren't like illegal drugs or something.
Yes. Even from behaviors we don't usually see as harmful. She champions taking breaks.
Is that where the dopamine fast comes in?
Exactly. She talks about a 30-day dopamine fast.
Yeah.
The idea is you abstain completely from your primary source of compulsive pleasure, whatever that is for you. Maybe social media, maybe sugar, maybe gaming for a whole month.
30 days. Wow. What's the goal there?
The goal is to let that pleasure-pain seesaw reset, to come back to a more neutral baseline. By doing that, you can potentially restore your brain's sensitivity, its capacity to feel real joy from, simpler, more natural things, everyday experiences.
Resetting the baseline. Okay, that makes sense neurologically based on the seesaw.
And tied into that is this concept she calls self-binding.
Self-binding. What's that involve?
It's basically about creating deliberate obstacles,
Yeah.
putting rules or barriers in place to help you regulate your own behavior, your desires, making it harder to indulge impulsively.
Okay, like what kind of things?
Could be simple stuff like literally leaving your phone in another room when you need to focus or using website blockers. Or it could be more complex, like her example of radical honesty.
Radical honesty.
Yeah, committing to being completely truthful about your habits, your struggles, maybe with a therapist or a partner or a support group. It creates this powerful external accountability.
Ah, I see. So you're binding yourself to honesty, which then helps control the behavior. Interesting.
Gary. And then there's maybe the most surprising one,
Which is,
harnessing pain for healing.
wait, embracing pain. That sounds unpleasant.
It does, but it's counterintuitive. Instead of constantly running from discomfort, Lembke suggests intentionally choosing it, engaging in voluntary hardship, essentially.
Like what kind of hardship are we talking about?
Well, she gives examples like ice baths or cold showers, that's cold therapy, or really rigorous exercise that pushes your limits, or even the pain of confronting difficult emotional truths you've been avoiding.
Okay, so deliberate discomfort. But why? How does that help with the dopamine problem?
The idea is that by voluntarily choosing these uncomfortable experiences, you're essentially pushing the seesaw towards the pain side yourself, but in a controlled way.
Ah, okay. So you're taking control of the seesaw in a sense.
Exactly. And the brain's rebound effect, its attempt to rebalance after that chosen pain, can actually resensitize your pleasure pathways. It makes you appreciate simple joys more. It's not about masochism. It's about reclaiming agency and resilience.
Resensitizing. That's fascinating.
And there's actually emerging science around this. It connects to concepts like hormesis.
Hormesis.
Yeah, it's the idea that a small dose of something stressful or potentially harmful can actually trigger adaptations that make the system stronger overall. Like how exercise, which is a physical stressor, makes muscles stronger.
So controlled, voluntary discomfort can strengthen our mental and emotional resilience and maybe even our capacity for joy.
That's the argument. By leaning into discomfort sometimes, instead of always avoiding it, you build resilience and potentially recalibrate that pleasure-pain balance.
Wow. Okay, this has been a really, really insightful look into Dopamine Nation. It gives you such a different lens for understanding, why we feel the way we do sometimes and offers some bold ideas.
It really does.
But like we said at the start, for that holistic understanding, we should also probably touch on the book's strengths, but also acknowledge where maybe there are some limitations or critiques.
Absolutely. Always important.
So strengths first. For me, a huge one is just Dr. Lemke's authority. Decades of clinical experience, research from Stanford, it just lends so much credibility to what she's saying.
Definitely. You trust her expertise?
And I also found her tone really engaging. It's conversational, not overly academic, plus her willingness to be vulnerable, like sharing her own struggles with romance novels, I think it was.
Yeah, she does.
It makes the complex brain science feel much more accessible, more human.
I completely agree. And another major strength, I think, is just how widely relevant the book is. It's not just for people with severe diagnosed addictions.
Right.
It really speaks to anyone who feels caught up in compulsive behaviors or feels that chronic stress or just that general emotional fatigue that seems so common today. It gives a name and a framework to that modern malaise.
Yeah, it resonates broadly. And critically, it's not just theory. She offers practical things you can actually do.
That's key. The
Right.
dopamine fasting idea, the self-binding strategies, radical honesty, these are actionable tools. They're not just abstract concepts. They're things you, the listener, could potentially try implementing.
Okay, so clear strengths and credibility, accessibility, relevance, and practicality. What about the other side? Any limitations or points of critique we should mention?
Well, like any approach, it has its perspective. One critique sometimes raised is that the book maybe places a very strong emphasis on individual responsibility and choice.
Okay. And the potential issue there is?
The potential issue is that it might, some argue, downplay or overlook the larger context. Things like broader structural issues, poverty, systemic racism, trauma, social inequality, which we know are huge factors contributing to addiction and mental health struggles.
Right. So the critique is it might focus too much on personal willpower without fully accounting for the societal pressures or disadvantages someone might be facing.
Exactly. It's a question of balance. How much is individual choice versus the environment? And related to that, the book's perspective is very much rooted in Western psychiatry.
Which is valuable.
But it might mean its cultural lens is somewhat limited. It doesn't delve deeply into how, say, different cultures or non-Western communities understand and address addiction or well-being.
That's a fair point. And one other thing I've heard mentioned is maybe an abstinence first bias.
Yeah, that comes up. While she does acknowledge harm reduction, the strong emphasis throughout the book is really on abstinence, particularly with the dopamine fast, as the kind of gold standard for resetting the system.
And the issue there could be.
Just that it might not resonate with everyone or every approach to recovery. Some recovery communities focus more on harm reduction, moderation management, or finding healthier substitutes rather than complete abstinence, especially initially.
So different paths work for different people. Her approach is powerful, but maybe not the only valid one.
Precisely. It's a valuable tool set, absolutely. But it's good for listeners to know it's one perspective, and they should consider what feels right and feasible for their own unique situation and context.
Okay, that feels like a balanced look. So bringing this whole deep dive together then, the core message of Dopamine Nation, it seems, isn't just about capital A addiction.
No, not at all.
It's really about how our everyday choices, especially in this incredibly overstimulating world we've built, are constantly shaping our emotional lives, our baseline for happiness, maybe even our sense of purpose.
Yeah, Dr. Lemke gives us both a really compelling diagnosis for this modern condition, this feeling of restlessness, craving, dissatisfaction, despite apparent abundance. And she offers a roadmap, a clear, if sometimes challenging path towards potentially finding greater balance, resilience, and maybe more authentic joy in a world that's often designed to keep us hooked.
A roadmap for recovery and balance. That's a good way to put it. So maybe a final thought for you listening today as you go about the rest of your day. Just consider what's one seemingly benign compulsive behavior you engage in regularly. Could be checking your phone, snacking, shopping online.
Something you do almost automatically.
Yeah, and just ask yourself, how might that be subtly shifting your own pleasure-pain balance? And what might happen, what might you discover about your true baseline for joy if you took even a short break, say a 24-hour or maybe even just a 1-hour dopamine fast from that specific thing?
Just a small experiment. What might it reveal?